One broken pencil changed the course of 2 lives forever. When Mariah shared her last pencil with a desperate classmate, she never imagined this simple act would eventually lead to a fortune worth millions. What began as a small sacrifice in a moment of kindness would spark an extraordinary journey from poverty to unimaginable wealth. But the real treasure wasn't just in dollars. It was in what happened when 2 paths, once briefly connected by a pencil, crossed again years later. Maria's hands trembled as she stared at the pencil in her grip. It wasn't just any pencil. It was the pencil. The one her mother had sacrificed to buy her 3 months ago, back when money was even tighter than it was now. She'd watched her mom count out the exact change at the store, watched her put back groceries to afford it. That pencil represented hope. It represented her mother's belief that Maria could do something extraordinary with her life. She'd sharpened it carefully, rationed every millimeter with surgical precision, made it last through countless assignments and late-night study sessions in their cramped apartment, lit by a single flickering bulb that hummed constantly. Every time she used it, she felt her mother's sacrifice. Every word she wrote with it felt like a promise that she wouldn't waste this opportunity, that she would make something of herself. Today was the entrance exam, the test that could change everything. The one test that mattered more than anything in her entire life. This wasn't just another school assessment. This was the gateway to a prestigious academy, the kind of place that could launch her out of poverty, away from the suffocating walls of their tiny apartment, away from the sounds of arguing neighbors and leaking pipes. This test was her ticket to a different future. The examination hall was silent, except for the sound of nervous breathing and shuffling papers. Maria had arrived early, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. She'd studied every single night for months, sacrificing sleep, sacrificing social time, sacrificing everything. Her hands were steady as she placed her precious pencil on the desk in front of her. But then, as she was mentally preparing herself, reviewing formulas in her mind one last time, she noticed something that made her stomach drop like a stone. 2 rows ahead, a girl she'd never seen before was frantically searching through her bag with increasing desperation. Her movements were becoming more frantic, more panicked. The girl was turning her bag inside out, dumping papers everywhere, her face growing paler by the second as the reality of her situation became undeniable. She had no pencil. Maria watched as the girl's hands stopped moving. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. This wasn't just an inconvenience. This was a catastrophe, a nightmare made real. Without a pencil, this girl wouldn't even be able to take the test. She wouldn't be able to write a single answer. All those years of preparation, all those late nights studying, all those dreams of a better life. They were about to evaporate in an instant because of one missing pencil. The proctor was checking his watch. Papers were being distributed. There were only minutes left. Maria felt her own anxiety spike. She knew exactly what that girl was feeling because she'd felt it herself countless times, the terror of not having enough, of being on the edge of losing everything because of circumstances beyond your control. She'd lived that fear her entire life. She looked down at her own pencil, her last pencil, the one she'd been saving, protecting, cherishing like it was made of gold. This pencil was her security blanket, her good luck charm, her mother's love made tangible. Without it, she felt vulnerable, exposed, afraid. But then Maria looked at the girl again, really looked at her. She saw herself reflected in that girl's terrified expression. She saw the desperation, the hopelessness, the feeling of being trapped by circumstances you didn't create and couldn't control. And in that moment, something shifted inside Maria. Something profound. Without letting herself think twice, because if she thought about it, she knew she wouldn't do it. She stood up and walked over to the girl. Her legs felt weak. Her heart was pounding even faster now. This was insane. This was her only pencil. This was her mother's sacrifice. But she did it anyway. With shaking hands, Maria snapped her precious pencil directly in half. The crack echoed through the silent examination hall like a gunshot. Several students looked up in surprise. The proctor raised an eyebrow. Maria handed one piece to the girl. "Here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We'll both use half." The girl's eyes widened in complete shock. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She stared at the half pencil in her hand like it was a miracle, like it was the most precious thing anyone had ever given her. "But this is your only one, isn't it?" The girl finally managed to ask, her voice trembling with emotion. Maria nodded, feeling tears prick her own eyes. She could feel the weight of what she'd just done settling on her shoulders. "We both need it more than I need a whole one," she said quietly. The girl's name was Eliza, and in that moment, neither of them knew that this single act of sacrifice, breaking her most precious possession for a complete stranger, would set in motion a chain of events so extraordinary, so impossible to predict, that it would eventually reshape both their destinies in ways neither girl could ever have imagined. This wasn't just about two students taking a test. This was about the invisible threads that connect human beings, about the ripple effects of kindness that can travel across years and continents. What Maria didn't know was that Eliza came from a wealthy family, that her forgotten pencil was actually just an oversight, a small mistake in an otherwise privileged life. What Eliza didn't know was that Maria's sacrifice would haunt her in the best possible way, that she would never forget the girl who broke her only pencil to help a stranger. As the test began, and both girls bent over their papers, their half pencils scratching against the surface, neither of them could have predicted what was coming. Neither could have imagined that this moment, this single crystalline moment of human compassion, would echo through their lives for decades to come, creating opportunities, connections, and ultimately, a fortune beyond their wildest dreams. But as the years passed, and their lives took dramatically different turns, neither Maria nor Eliza would ever forget that pencil or what it meant. And when their paths crossed again, it would be under circumstances so unexpected, so perfectly orchestrated by fate itself, that it would change everything. The test ended 3 hours later. Maria walked out of the examination hall feeling hollowed out, emotionally drained, but also strangely at peace. She'd done her best with half a pencil. That would have to be enough. Her hand was cramped, her fingers stained with graphite, but her mind felt clear. She'd answered every question. She'd poured everything she had onto those pages. Eliza caught up with her in the corridor just as Maria was heading toward the exit, weaving through the crowd of other students who were chatting excitedly about the questions they'd answered. "Wait," Eliza called out, slightly breathless, pushing through the throng of bodies. "I never got your name." Maria turned, surprised to see the girl she'd helped. "Maria," she replied simply, taking in Eliza's appearance more carefully now. Even in her anxiety, she could see that Eliza came from a different world. Her uniform was pristine, her shoes were polished, her hair was perfectly styled. Everything about her spoke of a life of comfort and privilege. "I'm Eliza," the girl said, extending her hand with genuine warmth. "And I don't know how to thank you. What you did back there, that was the most incredible thing anyone has ever done for me." Eliza's eyes were sincere, filled with genuine gratitude that seemed to go far deeper than the situation warranted. "I'm serious. You didn't have to do that. You could have just let me fail, and no one would have blamed you. No one would have even known. But you broke your own pencil." Maria shook her head, uncomfortable with the intensity of Eliza's gratitude. "Everyone deserves a chance," she said simply, her voice quiet but firm. "I just gave you yours." They exchanged numbers that day, a gesture that seemed insignificant at the time, but would prove to be the thread connecting their futures. For a brief, shining moment, they were just two girls who'd shared something profound during an exam. They promised to stay in touch, to see how they each did on the test results. Eliza invited Maria to coffee, but Maria politely declined, citing her need to get home to her mother. Eliza didn't push, but she made Maria promise they would meet again soon. They never did. 3 weeks later, the results came back. Maria scored in the top 5 percentile, an extraordinary achievement that should have opened doors for her. The letter of acceptance arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a postal worker who seemed almost as excited as Maria was. And it did open doors, to a certain extent. She was accepted to the prestigious academy, the one that could change her life, the one she'd dreamed about since she was a child. But her mother's health took a sudden, catastrophic turn just days after the acceptance letter arrived. Her mother had been coughing for months, a persistent, hacking cough that echoed through their small apartment at night. They'd ignored it, attributed it to the damp apartment with its water-stained walls and moldy corners, the stress of their financial situation, the pollution that hung over the city like a permanent fog. The diagnosis came like a thunderbolt from a clear sky. Advanced tuberculosis. The doctors said it had been progressing for years, that her mother had likely contracted it long ago, but had been too busy surviving to notice the symptoms. The treatment was expensive. The medication was expensive. The hospital visits were expensive. The specialized care was expensive. Everything was expensive, and Maria's family had nothing. They had a roof over their heads, barely, and they had food on the table, barely. But they had no reserves, no safety net, no cushion for catastrophe. Maria faced an impossible choice, the kind of choice that no 20-year-old should ever have to make. She could attend the academy and watch her mother die without proper care, could pursue her dreams while her mother suffered. Or she could stay home, work, try to earn money for her mother's treatment, and give up her dream. There was no third option. There was no miracle waiting in the wings. There was no wealthy relative who would suddenly appear with money. There was no government assistance that would materialize. There was only this, a choice between two kinds of devastation. She chose her mother. Maria withdrew from the academy with a letter that took her 3 hours to write, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the pen. She took a job at a textile factory, working 12-hour shifts for meager wages that barely covered her mother's medication. The factory was hot and loud and dangerous, filled with the sound of machinery and the smell of chemicals. Her fingers became calloused and stained. Her back began to ache constantly. Her lungs filled with lint and dust. She spent her evenings caring for her mother, bringing her water, changing her sheets, reading to her by candlelight to save on electricity. Her mother would drift in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid enough to apologize for being a burden, sometimes lost in fever dreams where she called out names of people long dead. Maria held her hand through it all, whispering words of comfort and love. The dreams she'd had, the future she'd imagined, walking through the academy's hallowed halls, studying with brilliant professors, becoming someone important. all of it faded into the background, replaced by the harsh reality of survival. She stopped thinking about what could have been and focused entirely on what was. The present moment, her mother's pain, the next shift at the factory, the next medication that needed to be purchased. She tried to contact Eliza a few times, picking up the phone with trembling hands and dialing the number she'd been given. But the phone would ring endlessly, or a voice would say the number was no longer in service. She didn't have money to make many calls anyway. Each one felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Eventually, she stopped trying. It seemed like Eliza belonged to a different world, one that Maria had never really been part of anyway. Eliza's family had moved, relocated to the capital city where Eliza's father had gotten a prestigious job in technology, working for one of the country's leading software companies. Their brief connection, forged in the crucible of that examination hall, seemed to dissolve into the chaos of their separate lives. As if it had been nothing more than a dream, a moment of connection that had no substance in the real world. Meanwhile, Eliza's world was expanding in ways Maria couldn't have imagined. Eliza's family was wealthy, genuinely, solidly wealthy in a way that opened doors and created opportunities at every turn. She attended the best schools, had access to the best tutors, traveled to different countries for holidays and educational programs. She learned languages, studied abroad for a semester in Europe, attended conferences where she rubbed shoulders with some of the brightest minds in technology and business. But something had changed in her after that exam day. Something fundamental had shifted in how she saw the world. She couldn't stop thinking about Maria, about the girl who'd broken her only pencil to help a stranger. She'd replay that moment in her mind constantly. The way Maria had walked over without hesitation, the sound of the pencil snapping, the look of determination on Maria's face. That act of kindness had planted a seed in Eliza's mind, a seed that would grow and flourish and eventually reshape her entire life. It made her question everything about privilege, about fairness, about what it meant to succeed. While other kids her age were focused on accumulating wealth and status, on getting into prestigious universities and landing high-paying jobs, Eliza became obsessed with understanding systems, how businesses worked, how technology could solve problems, how innovation could create opportunities for people like Maria. She threw herself into her studies with renewed purpose, driven by something deeper than mere ambition. She learned programming, staying up late into the night teaching herself code through online tutorials and books. She studied business strategy, reading biographies of entrepreneurs and analyzing case studies. She devoured books on economics, social responsibility, and the history of innovation. She read voraciously about entrepreneurship and social responsibility, filling notebook after notebook with ideas and plans. She spent her teenage years building small projects, coding applications that solved real problems, teaching herself the skills that would eventually make her one of the youngest tech entrepreneurs in the country. Her first project was a simple app to help students find affordable tutoring. Her second was a platform for connecting small business owners with investors. Each project was more ambitious than the last, each one informed by her desire to create pathways for people who didn't have her advantages. But even as Eliza built her empire, starting her first company at 22, securing venture capital from investors who were impressed by her vision and her execution, scaling rapidly as her platform gained users, she never forgot Maria. She never forgot the half pencil. She never forgot the girl who'd sacrificed everything for a stranger. Eliza's company, initially focused on productivity software, evolved into something larger and more meaningful. She became known not just for her business acumen, but for her philosophy. That success meant nothing if it didn't create pathways for others. She built mentorship programs that paired successful entrepreneurs with talented people from disadvantaged backgrounds. She created scholarship funds that helped students attend universities they couldn't otherwise afford. She launched initiatives designed to help talented people from disadvantaged backgrounds access the resources and connections they needed to succeed. And all of it traced back to that moment in the examination hall. All of it was, in some way, Eliza trying to honor what Maria had taught her about the power of sacrifice and kindness. Every program she created, every dollar she invested in helping others, every mentee she took under her wing, it was all an attempt to pay forward what Maria had given her. Meanwhile, Maria's life had become a study in endurance and quiet suffering. Her mother lived another 5 years after the diagnosis, and Maria spent every single day of those 5 years working, caring, sacrificing. She developed an almost supernatural ability to stretch a rupee until it screamed, to make something from nothing, to create value where there seemed to be none. She learned to fix things with her hands, to repair broken machinery at the factory, to create beauty from scraps of fabric and thread. She learned to design and sew clothing from salvaged materials, transforming cast-off fabric into wearable art. What started as necessity became a skill. What started as survival became art. Her co-workers would bring her torn clothes to mend, and she'd return them not just repaired but improved, embellished with beautiful stitching and creative details. People began to ask her to make things for them, to design custom pieces. She started taking on small sewing projects in the evenings, earning a little extra money that she could put toward her mother's care. After her mother passed away, on a cold February morning, her hand in Maria's, her breathing finally stopping after years of struggle. Maria was left with nothing but her hands, her creativity, and the memories of the life she might have lived. She was 23 years old, and she felt ancient. She'd aged a decade in those 5 years, her face lined with exhaustion, her spirit worn thin by grief and sacrifice. She continued working at the factory, but she started designing in her spare time, sketching clothing designs on scraps of paper, imagining fabrics and patterns, creating beauty in the margins of her exhausted life. She'd work at the factory from 6 in the morning until 6 in the evening, then come home and design until midnight or later, her fingers moving almost of their own accord, translating the visions in her mind onto paper. Her designs were extraordinary, even on scraps of paper, using pencils she could barely afford. Maria created clothing designs that showed genuine innovation and artistic vision. Her work had a distinctive style, elegant but practical, beautiful but wearable, with details that suggested deep thought and careful consideration. She drew inspiration from the world around her, from the colors of the city at sunset, from the way fabric moved, from the traditional patterns of her culture. Her co-workers noticed, some of the factory managers noticed, but nothing came of it. She was just a poor girl with a talent that had nowhere to go. The factory managers appreciated her work ethic, but didn't see her as anything more than a reliable employee. Her co-workers admired her designs, but had no connections to help her move forward. Years passed. Maria became known in her small community as the girl who could make anything beautiful, the one who could take a piece of cloth and transform it into something magical. But her talent remained locked away, unexpressed, unrealized. She'd never attended the academy. She'd never gotten the education she deserved. She'd never had the opportunities that could have launched her into the world. She'd never had a mentor or a champion or someone with connections who could help her break through. And she'd accepted this as her fate. Not happily, but with the resignation of someone who'd learned that life wasn't fair, that talent alone wasn't enough, that sometimes the universe simply didn't give you the breaks you needed. She worked, she designed, she survived. That was her life. What Maria didn't know was that her sacrifice on that exam day had created a debt that the universe was still trying to repay. What she didn't know was that across the city, in gleaming office buildings with floor-to-ceiling windows, in conference rooms where major decisions were made, Eliza was building something extraordinary, something that would eventually create a space for girls exactly like Maria. Eliza had never stopped looking for her. Not actively, not constantly, but somewhere deep in her heart, she'd held on to the memory of that girl with the broken pencil. She'd saved the half pencil in a drawer in her office, a physical reminder of where she'd come from, of what had inspired her to build her empire. And when Eliza's company became large enough, when she had enough resources and influence, she would finally have the power to search for Maria in earnest. She hired private investigators. She searched through public records. She reached out to the academy to see if they had any information. She was determined to find the girl who'd changed her life. But that moment hadn't arrived yet. For now, Maria and Eliza lived in separate worlds, their lives diverging further with each passing year. Maria worked in obscurity, her talent burning quietly like a candle in a dark room, visible only to those close enough to see it. Eliza built her empire, all the while carrying the memory of a half pencil and a girl named Maria, not knowing where she was or what had become of her. The city was large, and two people could live in it for years without crossing paths. The odds of them finding each other again seemed impossibly small. And yet, the universe had a way of arranging these things, of bringing people together when the time was right, when both of them were ready for what would come next. Neither of them knew that their paths would cross again. Neither of them could have predicted that the universe had been quietly arranging their reunion all along, waiting for the perfect moment when Eliza's power and resources would finally be enough to change Maria's life forever. The pencil had been broken, but its magic was far from finished. In fact, the most extraordinary part of their story was only just beginning. 10 years had passed since Eliza first started her company. She was now 32 years old, and her success had exceeded even her own ambitious expectations. Her platform, which she'd named Pathways, had become one of the most influential social entrepreneurship networks in the country. It connected talented individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds with mentors, investors, and opportunities. Thousands of people had used Pathways to transform their lives. Eliza's net worth had climbed into the hundreds of millions. She'd been featured on magazine covers, invited to speak at international conferences, and approached by governments seeking her advice on economic development and social mobility. She had everything she'd ever dreamed of: wealth, influence, recognition, and the satisfaction of knowing that her work was genuinely changing lives. But there was still one thing she didn't have. One person she couldn't find: Maria. The half pencil sat in a frame on Eliza's desk, right next to her computer. Every time she looked at it, she felt a mixture of gratitude and guilt. Gratitude for what Maria had taught her. Guilt that she'd never been able to find her, to thank her properly, to offer her the opportunities that Eliza herself had been given. Over the years, Eliza had made several attempts to locate Maria. She'd hired private investigators who'd hit dead ends. She'd searched through school records and public databases. She'd even reached out to the academy, but their records from that day were incomplete. They had the names of students who'd been accepted, but not the names of all the students who'd taken the entrance exam. It was like trying to find a specific grain of sand on a beach. Maria was out there somewhere in a city of millions, but Eliza had no way to reach her. Then, one day in late autumn, everything changed. Eliza was reviewing applications for her latest initiative, a program designed to identify and support exceptional designers and artisans from low-income communities. The program had been running for 3 months, and applications were flooding in. Eliza had hired a team of experts to review them, but she still liked to go through a selection of the most promising ones herself. She was sitting in her office, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, when she opened an application that made her stop breathing. The applicant's name was Maria Chen. The portfolio included sketches and photographs of clothing designs, extraordinary designs that showed remarkable vision and technical skill. But it wasn't just the quality of the work that made Eliza freeze. It was the story included with the application. "I have been designing clothing for over 15 years. The application read, "Though I have never had formal training or the opportunity to pursue this passion professionally. I work at a textile factory by day and design by night. My mother passed away many years ago, and I spent my youth caring for her instead of pursuing my education. I never attended the academy, though I was accepted. I don't have a degree or credentials or connections. But I have a vision for what clothing can be, how it can honor our heritage while embracing innovation, how it can be both beautiful and practical, how it can empower the people who wear it. If given the opportunity, I believe I could create something meaningful." Eliza's hands were shaking as she read those words. She pulled up the photograph that had been included with the application. It was a simple headshot, but Eliza would have recognized that face anywhere. The same determined expression, the same intelligent eyes. Older now, marked by years of hardship, but unmistakably the same girl. It was Maria. For a long moment, Eliza just sat there, staring at the screen. She felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. After 10 years of searching, after countless dead ends and disappointments, Maria had come to her. Not through any of Eliza's efforts, but through her own initiative, her own determination to find a way forward. Eliza immediately pulled up Maria's contact information and stared at the phone number. Her heart was pounding. She wanted to call right away, but she was afraid. What if Maria didn't remember her? What if the moment had passed? What if Maria had moved on and didn't want to be reminded of that day in the examination hall? But then Eliza thought about what she would want if she were Maria. She would want to be given a chance. She would want someone to believe in her. She would want the opportunity to become who she was meant to be. Eliza picked up the phone. Maria was at work when the call came through. She was sitting at her sewing station, stitching a seam on a piece of fabric, when her phone buzzed. She almost didn't answer it. She rarely got calls, and she was in the middle of a task. But something made her pick up the phone. "Hello?" she said, her voice uncertain. "Maria." The voice on the other end was trembling with emotion. "Maria Chen." "Yes," Maria said, confused. "Who is this?" "My name is Eliza Kapoor. I think we met a long time ago, at the entrance exam for the academy, 10 years ago." Maria's hands went numb. The phone nearly dropped from her fingers. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Her co-workers looked up, startled. "Eliza?" Maria whispered. "Is it really you?" "Yes," Eliza said, and Maria could hear the smile in her voice. "It's really me. I received your application for the Pathways Design Initiative. Maria, your work is extraordinary. I've been looking for you for years. I never stopped looking." Maria couldn't speak. She couldn't breathe. She felt like she was floating, like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "I know this is probably shocking," Eliza continued, speaking quickly now, the words tumbling out. But I need you to know something. That day at the exam, when you broke your pencil for me, that changed my entire life. It taught me something about kindness and sacrifice that I've never forgotten. Everything I've built, everything I've accomplished, it all traces back to that moment. And I've been trying to find you ever since. Why? Maria asked, her voice barely audible. Why would you look for me? Because I owe you, Eliza said simply. Because you gave me something that day that was worth more than money or education or any of the advantages I had. You gave me a lesson in what it means to be human. And I wanted to repay that debt. I wanted to help you the way you helped me. Maria felt tears streaming down her face. Her co-workers were staring at her now, concerned. She turned away, pressing the phone closer to her ear. I don't know what to say, Maria whispered. Say you'll meet with me, Eliza said. Say you'll let me tell you about the opportunity I have in mind. Say you'll give me a chance to change your life the way you changed mine. They arranged to meet the following day at a coffee shop near Maria's apartment. Maria spent the entire night unable to sleep, her mind racing with possibilities and fears. What if this was some kind of mistake? What if Eliza had confused her with someone else? What if, after all these years, nothing came of this? But when she walked into the coffee shop the next morning and saw Eliza sitting at a corner table, all her doubts evaporated. It was unmistakably her. Older now, more polished, but with the same warmth in her eyes that Maria remembered. Eliza stood up when she saw Maria, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Then Eliza walked forward and pulled Maria into an embrace. Maria could feel Eliza trembling, could feel the emotion radiating from her. I can't believe I found you, Eliza whispered. I can't believe it's really you. They sat down at the table, and Eliza pulled out a small frame. Inside was a half pencil, yellowed with age, mounted carefully behind glass. I've kept this all these years, Eliza said. It's the most valuable thing I own, not because it's a pencil, but because of what it represents. It represents the moment that changed everything for me. Maria stared at the half pencil, and suddenly the memories came flooding back. The exam hall, the girl frantically searching for a pencil, the moment she'd made the decision to break her own pencil in half. It felt like a lifetime ago, but also like it had happened yesterday. I don't understand, Maria said. Why are you telling me this now? What do you want from me? I want to offer you an opportunity, Eliza said. I want to invest in your talent. I want to help you launch your own design company. I want to be your mentor and your partner in this venture. But more than that, I want to be your friend. I want to know what happened to you over these past 10 years. I want to hear your story. And so Maria told her story. She told Eliza about her mother's illness, about her decision to leave the academy, about the years of working at the factory while caring for her mother. She told her about the designs she'd created in the margins of her exhausted life, about the dreams she'd had to put aside, about learning to accept that some doors were simply closed to people like her. Eliza listened to every word, and when Maria finished, there were tears streaming down both of their faces. I'm going to change that for you, Eliza said firmly. You're going to launch your own line. We're going to use every resource I have to make sure your designs reach the world. You're going to have the opportunity you should have had 10 years ago. Why would you do that? Maria asked. You don't owe me anything. That was just a pencil. It wasn't just a pencil, Eliza said. It was a choice. A choice to sacrifice something precious for a stranger. A choice that showed me what real kindness looks like. And yes, I do owe you. I owe you everything. Over the next few weeks, Eliza and Maria spent countless hours together. They worked on Maria's portfolio, refined her designs, and began planning the launch of her brand. Eliza introduced Maria to investors, to manufacturers, to retailers. She used every connection she had to open doors for Maria. But more than that, they became friends. Real friends. They talked for hours about their lives, their dreams, their fears. Maria learned about Eliza's journey. The pressure of being a young entrepreneur, the loneliness of success, the constant drive to prove herself. Eliza learned about Maria's resilience, her creativity, her ability to find beauty and meaning even in the darkest circumstances. They discovered that they complemented each other perfectly. Eliza had the business acumen and the connections, but Maria had the artistic vision and the authenticity. Together, they were more than either of them could be alone. But as they began to build their partnership, neither of them could have predicted the challenges that lay ahead. Success, they would soon discover, came with its own set of complications. And the universe, it seemed, wasn't quite finished testing their friendship or their commitment to each other. The months that followed were a whirlwind of activity and transformation. Maria found herself living a life she'd only dreamed about. Eliza had set her up in a small studio space in the design district, equipped with the best sewing machines, fabrics, and tools. She'd hired a small team of seamstresses to help Maria bring her designs to life. More importantly, she'd given Maria something she'd never had before: time. Time to design without working a 12-hour shift at the factory first. Time to develop her vision. Time to be an artist. Maria submitted her resignation from the textile factory on a Tuesday morning. Her supervisor, a man named Mr. Desai, who'd always been kind to her, seemed genuinely happy for her, though she could see the sadness in his eyes at losing such a talented employee. "You're going to do great things," he told her as she packed up her belongings. "I always knew you were meant for something more than this place." The first collection took 3 months to complete. Maria poured everything into it, all the designs she'd sketched over the years, all the ideas she'd been forced to keep locked inside, all the dreams she'd been afraid to pursue. The collection was called Heritage, and it told the story of her journey through clothing. Each piece was a masterpiece. The fabrics were carefully selected, sourced from artisans across the country. The stitching was impeccable, each seam a testament to Maria's technical skill. But what made the collection truly special was the vision behind it. The way each garment seemed to honor tradition while embracing innovation. The way they made statements about identity and resilience and beauty. Eliza arranged for a fashion show to launch the collection. It would be held at one of the city's most prestigious venues, with invitations going out to fashion editors, influencers, retailers, and celebrities. It was an ambitious move, launching an unknown designer with a single collection at a major fashion show. But Eliza believed in Maria completely, and she had the resources and connections to make it happen. The night before the show, Maria couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about how far she'd come, from a girl working at a textile factory to a designer about to debut her collection to the fashion world. It seemed impossible. It seemed like a dream that could vanish at any moment. Around midnight, she called Eliza. "I can't do this," Maria said, her voice trembling. "I'm not ready. My work isn't good enough. People are going to laugh at me." "Listen to me," Eliza said calmly. "You are absolutely ready. Your work is extraordinary. And even if someone does laugh, which they won't, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you're doing this. You're taking your shot. You're refusing to let fear stop you." How are you so confident? Maria asked. Because I've seen what you can do, Eliza replied. And because I know you. I know what you're capable of. You broke your only pencil to help a stranger. You spent 5 years caring for your mother instead of pursuing your dreams. You've been designing in the margins of an exhausted life for over a decade. If anyone deserves success, it's you. The fashion show was scheduled for 7 o'clock in the evening. Maria arrived at the venue at 3 o'clock, needing time to oversee the setup, to make sure every detail was perfect. The models were being fitted into the garments, and Maria watched with a mixture of pride and anxiety as her designs came to life on their bodies. Eliza was there too, dressed impeccably in one of Maria's pieces, a stunning evening gown that seemed to capture the essence of the entire collection. She moved through the venue with the confidence of someone accustomed to being in control, making sure everything was running smoothly. "You look terrified," Eliza said, coming to stand beside Maria as they watched the models rehearse their walk. "I am terrified," Maria admitted. "What if this doesn't work? What if people hate it? What if I've made a terrible mistake?" "Then you'll have tried," Eliza said simply. "And trying is what matters. You've spent 10 years not trying because you didn't have the opportunity. Now you have the opportunity. Use it." By 6:30, the venue was filling with people. Fashion editors from major publications, celebrities and influencers, retailers looking for new designers, members of the fashion establishment who'd made or broken countless careers. The energy in the room was electric, expectant. Maria stood backstage, watching the crowd through a crack in the curtain. She felt like she was going to be sick. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold them still. Then the lights dimmed, and the music began. The somehow first model walked out onto the runway, wearing a stunning jacket that Maria had designed. A piece that combined traditional embroidery with modern silhouettes. The crowd fell silent, and Maria held her breath. For a moment, nothing happened. Then someone started clapping. Then another person. Then the entire audience erupted into applause. One by one, the models walked the runway, each wearing a different piece from Maria's collection. And with each model, the applause grew louder. By the time the final model walked out, the audience was on their feet, cheering. Then Eliza took Maria's hand and led her out onto the runway. Maria felt like she was floating, like none of this was real. The applause was deafening. People were standing, giving her a standing ovation. Tears were streaming down her face. She looked out into the crowd and saw people she recognized from fashion magazines, influential people who could make or break a designer's career. They were smiling, nodding, taking photographs. She could see the respect in their eyes. When she and Eliza came backstage, Maria collapsed into a chair, overwhelmed by emotion. "You did it," Eliza said, pulling her into an embrace. "You actually did it." The reviews came out the next morning, and they were glowing. "A stunning debut from a designer with a unique vision," one major publication wrote. Maria Chen's Heritage Collection is a masterclass in how to honor tradition while embracing innovation. This is a designer we'll be watching closely. Orders started coming in immediately. Retailers wanted to stock her pieces. Fashion houses wanted to collaborate with her. Magazines wanted to feature her. Within a week, Maria's collection had sold out completely. But with success came complications that neither Maria nor Eliza had anticipated. The first issue emerged when a major fashion house approached Maria with an offer. They wanted to acquire her brand, to bring her on as their head designer, to expand her collection into a global enterprise. The offer was enormous. Millions of dollars, resources beyond anything she could have imagined, the ability to reach customers around the world. Maria was tempted. How could she not be? This was the kind of opportunity that most designers never got. But when she discussed it with Eliza, she could see the hesitation in her friend's eyes. "What do you think I should do?" Maria asked. "I think you should do what feels right to you," Eliza said carefully. "But I also think you should consider what you'd be giving up. If you sell your brand to a major fashion house, you lose control. You lose your vision. You become an employee instead of an artist." "But I'd have resources," Maria pointed out. "I could reach so many more people." "You could," Eliza agreed. "But at what cost? You spent 10 years creating in the margins, holding onto your vision even when it seemed impossible. Are you really willing to compromise that vision now that you finally have the chance to realize it?" Maria turned down the offer. It was one of the hardest decisions she'd ever made. But she knew Eliza was right. She didn't want to build someone else's empire. She wanted to build her own. But the rejection of the major fashion house created tension. They weren't used to being told no, and they began spreading rumors in the industry. They suggested that Maria's success was a fluke, that she was difficult to work with, that her designs weren't commercially viable. They used their considerable influence to try to damage her reputation. Orders started to dry up. Retailers who'd been eager to stock her pieces suddenly became unavailable. Magazine editors who'd been enthusiastic about featuring her work became distant. The momentum that had been building began to stall. Maria started to panic. She'd had a taste of success, and now it was slipping away. She began to doubt herself, to wonder if she'd made a terrible mistake in turning down the fashion house's offer. One evening, she sat in her studio long after everyone else had left, staring at a half-finished piece. She felt the old, familiar weight of despair settling on her shoulders. Maybe this was all too good to be true. Maybe she wasn't meant to succeed. Maybe she should have stayed at the factory, where at least she knew what to expect. She called Eliza. "I think I made a mistake," she said without preamble. "I think I should have taken the offer from the fashion house. At least then I'd have resources and support. Now I'm just watching everything fall apart." "Nothing is falling apart," Eliza said firmly. "You're experiencing resistance. That's different. That's what happens when you threaten the status quo. The fashion establishment doesn't like it when someone comes in and challenges the way things have always been done." "So what do I do?" Maria asked desperately. "You keep going," Eliza said. "You keep creating. You keep believing in your vision. And you let me handle the business side. That's what partners do. They support each other through the difficult times." "But what if you can't fix this?" Maria asked. "What if their influence is too strong?" "Then we'll find another way," Eliza said. "We'll build our own distribution network. We'll sell directly to customers. We'll use social media to reach people. We'll do whatever it takes. But we're not giving up. Not now. Not when we've come this far." Eliza threw herself into damage control with the same intensity she brought to everything else. She reached out to independent boutiques and retailers who weren't part of the establishment. She launched a direct-to-consumer online store for Maria's brand. She used her connections in the tech world to create a social media campaign that highlighted Maria's story and her designs. Within a few months, the narrative began to shift. Instead of being seen as a fluke, Maria became known as a designer who dared to defy the establishment, who'd refused to compromise her vision for corporate interests. Her story, from factory worker to celebrated designer, resonated with people. Her brand became a symbol of authenticity and integrity in an industry often criticized for the opposite. Orders started coming in again, this time from customers who were drawn to Maria's story as much as her designs. Her pieces became status symbols for people who valued craftsmanship and individuality over brand names and trends. 6 months after the initial backlash, Maria's brand was stronger than ever. She'd weathered the storm and come out the other side not just surviving, but thriving. One evening, as they were closing up the studio, Eliza handed Maria a small gift-wrapped box. "What's this?" Maria asked. "Open it," Eliza said with a smile. Inside was a beautiful pencil, not half a pencil, but a whole perfect pencil. It was made of the finest materials, with an eraser tipped in gold, and Maria's name engraved along its length. "I had this made for you," Eliza explained. "As a reminder, you started with half a pencil and the willingness to sacrifice everything for someone else. Now you have a whole pencil, and you've created something beautiful with it. But more importantly, you've shown that success doesn't require compromising your values. It requires believing in yourself and having people around you who believe in you too." Maria held the pencil carefully, tears forming in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for finding me, for believing in me, for everything. Thank you for breaking your pencil for me 10 years ago," Eliza replied. That single act of kindness set everything in motion. It changed both our lives. But as Maria and Eliza celebrated their success, neither of them knew that the greatest test of their friendship was still to come. Success had brought them together and strengthened their bond. But it would also attract the attention of people who wanted to exploit that bond, who saw opportunity in their partnership, and who would stop at nothing to tear them apart. As Maria's brand continued to gain traction, the buzz around her designs transformed into a genuine movement. Fashion enthusiasts, influencers, and consumers rallied behind her story, embracing her vision of authenticity and craftsmanship. The success of the Heritage Collection paved the way for new designs, and Maria found herself in the enviable position of having to expand her offerings quickly. Eliza, always the strategist, suggested they hold a series of pop-up shops to showcase Maria's new collections. This would not only allow them to engage directly with customers, but also to build a community around the brand. Maria loved the idea. It aligned perfectly with her vision of connecting people through her designs. They set a schedule for the pop-up shops, starting with locations in trendy neighborhoods and then branching out to other cities. The first event was a resounding success. The atmosphere was electric, filled with excitement as customers tried on clothes, shared their stories, and connected with Maria and Eliza. Yet, amid the success, shadowy figures loomed. The major fashion house that had initially approached Maria was not ready to let go of the potential that they saw in her. They began to strategize ways to undermine her success, eager to prove that their offer had been the right one and that Maria's brand was just a passing trend. One evening, as Maria and Eliza were preparing for their second pop-up shop, Maria received an unexpected phone call. It was from a prominent fashion journalist, someone she had admired for years. "Maria, I'd love to feature you in an article about rising stars in the fashion industry," the journalist said, her voice filled with enthusiasm. "I think your story is remarkable and needs to be shared." Maria's heart raced. "That sounds incredible. I'd love to participate." "Great. I'll be at your pop-up shop tomorrow to interview you and take some photos. I want to capture the energy of your designs and the community you're building," the journalist replied. As the call ended, Maria turned to Eliza with a bright smile. "This is amazing. A feature could take our brand to the next level." Eliza smiled back, but there was a flicker of concern in her eyes. It's fantastic, but let's be careful. We want to control the narrative, especially with everything that's been happening. Maria nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. She wanted to be open and share her journey, but she understood Eliza's caution. They had worked too hard to let anything derail their progress. The next day, the pop-up shop was buzzing with activity. Customers chatted excitedly, trying on clothes and sharing their thoughts on the designs. When the journalist arrived, Maria was ready. She spoke passionately about her journey, her designs, and the inspiration behind each piece. The interview flowed naturally, and Maria felt empowered as she shared her story. As the journalist snapped photos, Eliza worked the crowd, connecting with customers and ensuring everything ran smoothly. But just as they were beginning to feel the momentum shift in their favor, a familiar figure entered the shop. It was Vanessa, the head of the major fashion house that had previously approached Maria. She walked in with an air of confidence, flanked by a couple of her associates. Maria's stomach dropped. She hadn't expected to see her here, especially not at such a pivotal moment. "Maria," Vanessa called out, her voice dripping with false cheerfulness. "What a lovely little shop you have. I must say I'm surprised to see so many people. Are they here to see your designs?" Maria felt a mix of anger and fear. "Yes, they are," she replied, trying to keep her tone steady. "We've built a community around the brand." Vanessa smirked, her eyes glinting with something that sent chills down Maria's spine. "A community, you say? How lovely. But let's not forget that it takes more than community support to make it in this industry. It takes connections, resources, and a solid foundation. I hope you're prepared for the challenges ahead." Eliza approached, sensing the tension in the air. "We're prepared," she said firmly, standing shoulder to shoulder with Maria. "We've got a vision, and we're committed to seeing it through." Vanessa laughed lightly, but there was an edge to it. "Vision is great, but don't be naive. The fashion world is ruthless. You're going to need to make some hard choices, and when the time comes, you may find yourself wishing you'd taken our offer." With that, Vanessa turned and walked away, leaving a lingering sense of unease in the air. Maria's heart raced, and she felt the weight of doubt creeping back in. "Don't let her get to you," Eliza said, sensing Maria's distress. "She's trying to intimidate us. But we're stronger than that. We're creating something meaningful, and that's what matters." The interview continued, and Maria pushed through her nerves, focusing on the excitement around her. But in the back of her mind, Vanessa's words echoed. After the pop-up shop, they returned to the studio, and Maria couldn't shake the feeling of unease. "What if she's right?" Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if I'm not prepared for what's coming?" Eliza turned to her, her expression serious. "You are prepared. You've been preparing your whole life for this moment. What matters is that we stay true to who we are. We won't lose our vision, and we won't let anyone dictate our path." But as the weeks went on, the pressure mounted. The major fashion house launched a smear campaign, spreading rumors that Maria's designs were unoriginal, echoing trends that were already established. They questioned her ability to sustain her brand in the long term, attempting to sow doubt among investors and retailers. Eliza worked tirelessly to counter the negative press. She organized social media campaigns that highlighted Maria's story and the authenticity of her designs. They reached out to supportive influencers who could amplify their message. Slowly, they began to regain their footing. But the fight was exhausting. One evening, as they prepared for another pop-up shop, Maria received an email that made her heart race. It was from a prestigious fashion magazine that had been following her story. They wanted to feature her in their next issue, highlighting her as one of the most promising new designers. "This could be huge, Eliza," Maria exclaimed, her excitement bubbling over. Eliza's expression was cautious. "It is huge, but we need to be strategic. The major fashion house will likely try to undermine this too. We have to control the narrative and put our best foot forward." They decided to hold a press event alongside the pop-up shop to announce the magazine feature, inviting journalists, influencers, and supporters. Maria felt a mix of excitement and anxiety as the day approached. This was a chance to reclaim the narrative and showcase her brand's authenticity. The day of the event arrived, and the energy in the studio was palpable. As the guests began to arrive, Maria felt her confidence surge. She was ready to share her story, ready to show the world what her brand stood for. But just as the event was about to begin, disaster struck. A group of protesters burst into the studio, holding signs that read, "Fake Fashion" and "Stop Exploitation." Maria's heart sank. The protesters screamed slogans about the fashion industry's impact on the planet and workers' rights, attempting to hijack the event. "Get them out!" Maria shouted, panic rising in her chest. Eliza quickly stepped in, trying to manage the situation. "Everyone, please remain calm. We support responsible fashion, and we're committed to ethical practices," she said, her voice steady as she approached the protesters. But the protesters were relentless. "You're part of the problem. You're just another designer using cheap labor," one shouted, pointing directly at Maria. Maria felt the weight of their words cut deep, but she refused to back down. "If you care about responsible fashion, then let's talk," she shouted back, surprising even herself. Eliza looked at her, a mix of pride and surprise in her eyes. "Yes, let's have a conversation," she added, stepping beside Maria. The room fell silent as the guests turned to watch. Maria took a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline surge through her veins. "I'm committed to creating a brand that respects both people and the planet. I want to create a community where we can all have these conversations and work together for change." Slowly, the atmosphere began to shift. The protesters, taken aback by Maria's sincerity, seemed to soften. "Are you really committed to ethical practices?" one asked, her voice less confrontational. "Yes," Maria replied, her heart pounding. "I'm dedicated to transparency in my production process. I want to create a brand that empowers workers and values craftsmanship. Let's talk about how we can do this together." The protesters exchanged glances, and after a few moments, they lowered their signs. "We're here to raise awareness, but we're also here for solutions," one of them said. "If you're serious, we're willing to engage in a dialogue." The tension in the room began to dissipate as Eliza facilitated a conversation between the protesters and the guests. Maria felt a sense of empowerment as she shared her vision, and what had begun as a chaotic disruption transformed into a meaningful discussion about responsible fashion. As the evening progressed, the initial tension gave way to collaboration. Maria and Eliza invited the protesters to join them in future initiatives focused on ethical practices, promising to explore ways to make their brand more sustainable. By the end of the night, the event had turned from a potential disaster into a powerful moment of connection and understanding. Maria received praise not only for her designs, but for her willingness to engage with difficult conversations. Later that night, as Maria and Eliza sat down to reflect on the evening, Maria couldn't help but smile. "I didn't expect that to happen." But I think it was a turning point for us, she said, feeling a sense of hope. Eliza nodded. It was. We're not just building a brand, we're building a movement. And that's what makes us different. But as they celebrated their triumph, the shadows of the fashion industry loomed larger than ever. The major fashion house was not about to give up easily. They watched from the sidelines, plotting their next move, ready to challenge everything Maria and Eliza had built. As Maria and Eliza forged ahead, they would soon discover that the fight for their vision was only just beginning. The industry was readying itself for a battle, and the stakes had never been higher. Would their bond withstand the pressure, or would the forces against them tear them apart? The test of their commitment, both to their mission and to each other, was about to unfold in ways they could never have anticipated.